I'd like to welcome you all to the school committee meeting of October 21st. You have before you an agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Presentations and discussions of issues of interest to the committee. Abigail Adams, scholarship winners.
I think I'll ask the students to come over and line up on the ramp while I'm explaining what the scholarship is to school committee. Some positive press about MCAS. Each year, students qualify for the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship based on their performance. On MCAS, they need to have achieved advanced in either math or ELA, and then proficient or advanced in the other subject area. This will be the last class where they just have the 2 proficient advanced requirement. Next year with the class of 2016, they are adding science, technology, and engineering to qualify for the scholarship. It's an 8-semester scholarship for tuition to any of the public colleges or universities in Massachusetts. We have 32 students in the class of 2015 who have qualified, and I'd like to bring them to school committee and give them an opportunity to introduce themselves and maybe what they're thinking about as plans for next year. So we'll start with you, Jake.
I think everyone knows me by now. I'm Jake. Like as in like what colleges I'm applying to? Okay. I'm thinking about applying like to Bucknell, Lehigh, or like UMass Amherst, WPI, schools like that. And maybe as of now, like environmental engineering or something.
Thanks.
I'm Nate Goss. I'm applying to Northeastern, Lehigh, Bucknell, and I'm going to major in computer science.
I'm Hannah Kelsey. I'm going to apply to Bentley, Bryant, UMass Amherst, and College of Charleston, and hopefully I'll major in marketing. I'm Carolyn Canetti. I plan to apply to several schools to make a list, specifically St. Lawrence, James Madison, Fairfield University, Ithaca, for nursing.
Nice.
I'm Zach Goddard. I'm looking to apply to Harvard, Dartmouth, and a few other schools, and I plan to major in economics or finance.
I'm Alana Vantis. I'm looking to apply to BC, Vassar, BBA, and I'm looking to go into foreign affairs. I'm Spring Tybert. I'm looking into UMass Amherst, BC, Northeastern, UVM, and I plan on going into either biology or environmental.
My name is Mia Saverio. I'm applying to also probably too many colleges to list, but Yale University, Georgetown, University of Virginia, many others, and I'm going in undecided, but with an interest in the sciences.
I'm Raheem Smith. I'm applying to Roger Williams, UMass Amherst, UMass Dartmouth, UMass Lowell, Roger Williams, Endicott, and many others from Bryant University also, and I'm kind of leaning towards communications right now.
My name is Carter Cool. I'm applying to Lafayette College, early decision, and I'm planning to study either chemistry or biology and then go into like a pre-veterinary kind of track.
I'm Emily Ferreira. I'm going to apply to Connecticut College, Emerson, Temple University, and I'm undecided.
I'm Lisa Gensener. I'm going to apply to the University of Virginia, Duke, Dartmouth, and Williams, and I'm also undecided.
I'm Sophie Davies. I'm going to apply to Columbia, UPenn, UC Berkeley, and Lehigh, and I plan on majoring in mechanical or environmental engineering.
I'm Amanda Dupree. I'm applying to Bridgewater, Westfield, and UMass Amherst, and I am planning to go into elementary education.
I'm Chloe Plank. I'm looking into applying at Mass Maritime, Maine Maritime, and universities throughout Europe, like Lund University in Sweden and the University of Lugano in Switzerland. And I plan to major in education or marine transportation.
I'm Noah Davidson. I'm going to apply to University of North Florida, UNC Wilmington, and College of Charleston. Looking to study marine science.
I'm Bailey Shirley, and I've not yet decided what I'm going to do in the future.
I'm Ben Zeef, and I'm applying to
Wheaton University, Clark University, and one more. And I'm undecided.
I'm Matt Correa. I'm gonna apply to UMass Amherst, UMass Dartmouth, and URI. I'm not sure what I'm making.
I'm Samantha Gray, and I hope to attend UMass Amherst and do veterinary major.
I'm Ashmita KC, and I plan to go to Simmons College or BC, UMass Amherst, and I plan to major in biology.
Hi, I'm Michael Woodford. I'm planning on attending UMass Amherst, Bridgewater State University, URI, and I'm leaning toward the business side.
I'm Mallory Mendez. I'm applying to Curry College, and I'm majoring in education.
I'm Owen Sullivan. I'm planning to apply to Rhode Island College, UMass Dartmouth, and Roger Williams. Planning to either major in computer science or some kind of art.
Any questions from the committee?
No questions, just congratulations to you all. We're just very proud.
We're very proud of all of you. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Well done. Well done. Thank you. You don't have to stay for the rest of the day. If you don't want to.
Thank you.
I'm happy to not sit here because it's a tiny Here's your fancy It's like a really
It's so nice to see them come to the meeting. It really puts in perspective.
And have our cake.
I know.
Well, I think that shows that we are doing something right. Many. Let's have the first quarter budget update.
I will.
Mr. Kozaret's going to give it to us.
I will take that. As you know, in the first quarter, it's pretty early in the year to look at anything and be worried about anything, but I think if you note that we are about 24% of expenditure funding as compared to last year, which at this time was 22%, and payroll is right now at about 11% expended compared to last year at 10% at this time. We do also have a report on the community schools' first fiscal quarter, and I think they're in good shape at this point. We do not have a school lunch program report because, as many of you know, we have not yet found a new director for the food service program, although I understand someone is on their way and will be moving into a place on Nantucket. I think it's this week or next week. So we can expect that report to come later. But really, at this point in the year, not a lot of variances, not a lot of transfers as you would expect.
Okay. Any questions?
Do we feel that we'll have earlier increases due to our new state testing and mandates and things like that may?
I think what you might see is some transfers within accounts in order to
Yeah.
transfer money into like equipment accounts so that we can outfit the middle and high school to be able to do that using technology. So you may see a little bit more activity from other accounts into...
Which makes sense.
Yeah, technology. for that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Diane?
No questions. Thank you.
Jeremiah?
You're fine. Here, Tim.
Flapped off my head.
Well, it's my pleasure to address the committee tonight for the first time in my new role as Director of English Language Learner Services for Nantucket Public Schools. I spoke to you 2 years ago. I assisted Abby LaRoe in her presentation last year, but it is my pleasure in my new role to speak to you as the Director. So, who is an English language learner? A student who doesn't speak English or whose native language is not English but is not yet able to perform ordinary classwork in English. Something to consider is that many ELLs were actually born on Nantucket. So who are our English language learners? These are some students from Ms. Fournier's 5th grade class last year, now at CPS. Some other of her 5th grade students. This is a 6th grade science class with an ELL who had very low oral proficiency, but is dressed in the gorilla outfit there as part of a research project on scientist Jane Goodall. These are members of my class from 2 years ago at CPS on a field trip to the oldest house. And this is a Nantucket High School student at her quinceañera last year, and you can see many members of the Salvadoran community in attendance. The turnout was over 200 people, and it was quite an event. I'm sorry, the machine skipped a few slides. I'm going to have to go back here. There we go. So ELLs come in all shapes and sizes. I won't disrespect you by reading what's up there. But we have different types of ELLs in our student body. Many of them who come brand new, come from different cultures with different experiences, oftentimes with a history of trauma perhaps, or a difficult journey to the United States. They can be low-level ELLs or they can be higher-level, advanced. Many of the kids who are long-term ELLs were in fact born here, but may not progress as rapidly as others due to the fact that English is only spoken at school. And when they're not in school, they're in a Spanish-speaking community. There are other factors there. They may not have a family who places a high value on literacy, for example, or a family who is able to help them with their homework. So they are they're in our program for longer than average. We also have a group of students, and this has been recently identified at the state level, of students who have had an interruption in their education for various reasons. I had a girl in 6th grade who wasn't in school for 3 years. I had a boy last year in 8th grade who wasn't in school for 4 years. And when they arrive here, our task is even more difficult because we have to bring them up to their classmates in terms of other academic skills, not just their English. There are also, like any other group of kids, children with special needs or learning disability. And one of our real challenges in the field of ELL is to identify students with learning disabilities who are not yet proficient in English. How do I identify them? How do we serve them? And then there's another group of ELLs who are gifted and talented. And like the slide says, they may be well advanced in other fields and have a high proficiency of English, or they may be highly advanced in other fields and have a low proficiency in English. So who are our students at the end of this? I asked 2 of my former students to come tonight. I'd like to introduce Melanie Mendez. Would you please stand just for a second, Melanie? You saw her as an honoree for the Abigail Adams Scholarship. Melanie came to us, thank you, in 2007. She entered Miss Carlson's class with no English proficiency. She was assisted by Eileen Tavares, who now works in the high school. She was one of my favorite students in grades 6 through 8. She made remarkable progress. She exited our program in 9th grade. We call that FLEPT. She is now considered a formally limited English proficient student. She FLEPT in 9th grade. She's got a strong academic record, as you can tell by the fact that she was here for the Abigail Adams Scholarship. She attended honors English, history, AP government classes, and now she's giving back to Nantucket High School in her role as a teaching assistant in the School to Career program. She was also a former Student of the Month at Nantucket High School. And in her other career, she runs foods for here and there at nighttime. So as you heard Melanie say, she's applying to Curry College. And she has, since middle school, considered becoming a teacher. And I really hope that she can pursue that. The other student that I've invited, please, is Asmita KC. Asmita came to us in 2010 from Nepal. Asmita is a gifted and talented student. She arrived with a high level of English proficiency, took AP Physics, AP Statistics, honors pre-calculus, and was inducted to the National Honor Society as a junior. She plays varsity softball. She volunteers in the Perfect Pals program. And you may have seen her on the sidelines as a Whalers cheerleader, which I believe she's been for 4 years. She's applying to some prestigious universities, and I expect her to do very well in her chosen field, if that is biology. Thank you both for coming. So the next few slides, I think I presented something like this 2 years ago, and I chose 1993 because it was a convenient 10-year sort of snapshot of the changes that have happened in our student body population in the last 20 years or so. So you can see as the 10-year increments progress that our minority population is growing. And if you'll look at last year, you can see how much it's grown. This slide represents our student body this year, and here are the statistics that made up that slide. I think it's very significant that minority students now make up 40% of our student body population. These are the languages spoken by students at Nantucket Public Schools. Predominantly Spanish. More and more Brazilian-born Portuguese speakers are returning. We had an exodus of Brazilians around the time of the economic recession in 2008. There's recently been an influx of many Nepali students. Smita is one. And there's a strong Bulgarian community on Nantucket, and there has been for some time. This is a chart of the historic growth in enrollment of all English language learners in Massachusetts. And you'll remember from an earlier slide that ELLs are only those students who cannot perform ordinary classwork in English. So all students who have exited our program and entered the mainstream are no longer considered ELL students. So the total for Massachusetts last year is 75,947 students in Massachusetts in English language learner programs. That doesn't account for one single student who has gone through the program and exited. Now, this is the picture of English language learners at Nantucket Public Schools. You can see a steady increase beginning with the uptick in the economy in 2009, and a very significant leap between last year and this. A reminder that this is a snapshot of October data. So the 2013 number is somewhat misleading in the fact that we began the year with 115 students, We finished at the end of the school year in June with 196. So it's not as if 107 students have enrolled this year. So 196 to 222, we've gained about 27, 28 students in total. And I apologize for the typo in this slide. Grade 8 should read 9 students in grade 8. So you can see that the elementary school has the largest population of English language learners. Opt-outs are students whose families have chosen for them not to receive designated English language learner services. They are just thrown right into the mainstream and immersed in the academic program. And that is a parent's right, and we offer that choice to them upon registration. I'd like this time to introduce the staff who is in attendance, who serve our students. Could you stand just when I call your name, please? Carmen Zayas is our ELL teacher at the high school. She's a native Spanish speaker. She comes to us from a career in public administration and policy analysis. She's worked for governments in California and Puerto Rico. She's been a consultant in Washington, D.C. She's certified in both Spanish and ELL, and she's pursuing her graduate degree in ELL at Fitchburg State. Today was the very first day of Marilyn Calderon's tenure at Nantucket High School. She comes to us as a native of Puerto Rico. I don't see her in the audience tonight. She herself was an English language learner in New Hampshire. We held out for the longest time trying to find a qualified teaching assistant who was fluent in Spanish. And it caused Ms. Zayas some anxiety for the first 2 months working without one, because she, as you could see, has an enormous caseload. But we're hopeful that Marilyn will come in and help Ms. Zayas. At the middle school, Catherine Kennedy Norton is in her first year in my former role. Catherine graduated with a double major in Spanish and education with a focus in ELL from Simmons College. Her master's degree is in Spanish literature. She's certified in French, Spanish, and ELL. Formerly, she taught French at CPS and Nantucket High School, and we were lucky enough to get her back from the community school last year where she taught Spanish. Also in the middle school, we have 2 other teachers who service ELLs in addition to their primary role. Those are Beth Connors, who's been here for 13 years, certified in ELL and special education, multiple certifications in reading. She has 1 section of ELLs at CPS currently, and she was our retail instructor for the Longbridge course last year. Janet Emack is a certified Spanish teacher. She's in her 16th year at Nantucket Public Schools. Her master's degree is in teaching Spanish. She's a certified translator, medical translator. She's also taught adult ESL and adult Spanish through the community school. In the elementary school, Tina Fournier is a certified ELL teacher with a master's degree in language and literacy. She is a speaker of both Italian and Spanish, and on a side note, she's an accomplished professional chef. Vesina Cheva is a native of Bulgaria. She's in her 15th year at the elementary school. Her master's degree is in English as a foreign language in Bulgaria, and she also has a master's degree in early education. She's certified in ELL, speaks Bulgarian, Russian, and some Spanish. Deborah Davis is a native Spanish speaker. She grew up in a bilingual household. Her bachelor's degree is in Spanish. Her master's degree is in elementary education. She's also a 16-year veteran of Nantucket Public Schools, where she taught Spanish at CPS and NHS for 7 years. She taught grade 1 at the elementary school for 5 years. She's certified in ELL, and this is her 3rd year in our program. We're very pleased to introduce Nicole Ridge. She's in her 1st year at Nantucket Elementary. She is certified in Spanish and ELL. She has a master's degree in world languages, and she is also endorsed in bilingual Spanish education and comes to us from a school where she taught bilingual Spanish education. Patricia Harding, I don't see her in the audience. She's a native of Columbia. She's been employed at the public school since 2009, bachelor's degree in psychology, a master's degree in psychology with a specialization in child and family organizations. She had a 25-year private practice in children and families, including 10 years working in the mental health field of psychology and emotional disabilities. Patricia works in the front office at the elementary school, and she is an invaluable resource at the elementary school for her outreach to the community and her facilitating registration for Spanish-speaking families. I don't know what we'd do without Patricia. Many of you know me from my 19 years of coaching at Nantucket Public Schools or teaching at the community school at night. I was an ELL teacher at the middle school. My bachelor's is in English and my master's degree is in teaching English as a second language. I'm also certified to deliver WIDA training, and this year I'm serving as the retail facilitator for the short bridge class and for the administrators class. And we would be very remiss if we left out Eileen Tavares, who works at the Nantucket High School front office, facilitating registration for Spanish-speaking families. She is our district translator, is her full-time job, and as I mentioned earlier, she's a former teaching assistant at Nantucket Elementary School. So what exactly are we doing at Nantucket Public Schools? Well, we are required to deliver two components of instruction to English language learners. The first is to provide them a meaningful access to the curriculum, and the second is to provide them with explicit, direct instruction in English language development. The ESL instructor's role is the latter. Their primary charge is to get the students up to speed where they can access the content areas. The classroom teachers are now being asked to assume more responsibility, and by the end of 2016 will be required to have what's called the Sheltered English Immersion Endorsement. SEI is the strategies and skills that we're teaching in the retail course, and the key here is to make the content comprehensible to students who do not have enough English proficiency to normally access that curriculum, and to promote the academic language development. You often hear people say, well, they speak English, because I hear them talking in the cafeteria or the playground. But that's what we call interpersonal social language. Academic language is highly demanding. It's the language of content areas, it's the language of schooling, it's the language of reading and writing. So there's a significant difference between someone who has oral proficiency in a social setting and the ability to use English in an academic setting. What exactly is the retail course made of? As I said, this year we're doing administration and a short bridge. Next year will be the full retail, which is a 3 graduate hour course. Many teachers will need to take that. I think the key here is that it's integrated with the 3 other major initiatives being undertaken in Massachusetts. The 2011 standards, including the Common Core and the Next Generation standards for science, the WIDA standards for English language learners and their teachers both in the ELL classroom and the SEI classroom, and the new educator evaluation system. Another key component, I believe, is that the collaborative practice and a whole school approach to teaching these students are critical. Nantucket is a cohort 2 district. That means that we started last year, basically, and we have until next year to provide everyone with their endorsement. So here's a snapshot of what we've done last year, what we're doing this year, and what we plan to do next year. You can see that core academic teachers are defined here. Those are the teachers required to have their SEI endorsement by the end of 2016 for recertification. This slide shows Standard 1 and Standard 2 of the Massachusetts Educator Evaluation System, and I've highlighted in red those that are particularly cogent to the needs of English language learners. For me, meeting diverse needs is tantamount to good instruction inclusion in the classroom, inclusion in the community, inclusion in the whole school. And then adjustment to practice. We've been doing things a certain way for a very long time, and as you can see, our demographics have changed drastically over the last 20 years. It's on us to adjust our practice to facilitate learning by the population that we now serve. Variety of assessment methods. Because we're aligned to the WIDA standards, we are adopting all of their assessment tools. The WAPT, which is the Access Placement Test, which we used, I think, successfully at the beginning of this year to register all of our new students. The Access is the annual exam administered in January, which we use for placement decisions and accountability to the state. The Model is something that I'm going to introduce at the end of the year to give us a more current snapshot of a student's proficiency when it comes time to schedule that student for the following year. Access provides exhaustive information, but since it's taken in January, the data is somewhat stale when we come to make placement decisions in June or even in September. I think that we talked about WIDA last year, so I won't go on too far about WIDA. The other thing that I'd like to see is the WIDA rubrics be incorporated somehow into our district-determined measures. They provide 2 rubrics for the productive skills of language, speaking and writing. I'm hopeful that we can work with our English teachers to integrate the WIDA rubrics with the Common Core-based rubrics that are anchoring our English language arts instruction. So the WIDA Access, the WIDA Model, and the WIDA Access Placement Test all give us descriptions of a student's proficiency level in English. Reaching students are exited from the program. Once they attain level 6, they are no longer considered ELL and are flepped, as we say. But you can see how the descriptors change by proficiency level. Minimal social language, minimal academic language with visual and graphic support. One of the things that's really exciting to me about WIDA is that it provides support for students at all levels. And as the complexity of what they're learning increases, the supports increase with it. But there are supports in place for beginner, low-level ELLs to help them gain vocabulary, to gain English language proficiency, and begin to access the content of the mainstream classes. So we use those proficiency levels when we're deciding on our placement. As you can see, each level has a very specific time for hours of direct ELL instruction. This does not mean in a class with an ELL teacher in the room. This means direct, explicit instruction in English language development so that a student is then able to access mainstream curriculum. You can see it begins at 2.5 hours a day, and then at the highest level, it's reduced to 2.5 hours a week. Also important, by a teacher qualified to teach ELLs. This slide shows how our ELLs are distributed through the 13 grade levels at Nantucket Public Schools. And Mr. Kozort and I had a good discussion this morning how significant it is, we think, that students at the upper elementary grades are clustered mostly in the high proficiency levels. And that speaks to the tremendous work that the ELL teachers are doing in the elementary school. You can see in grade 1 we have many beginners, but by the time they get up into the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, most of them are either exited the program or are at the highest levels within the program. At the middle school, you can see we've had a huge influx of newcomers at very low proficiency level. And at the high school, the bulk of the students are at lower proficiency levels. And you'll see that in the upcoming slide on the access testing data. So here's the access testing data from last January for the district. There are many other bits of information provided in an access report, but I put together the 4 that I think are most significant. And on the right is the overall composite, and that is where we make our classification decision, is based on the overall composite proficiency of an English language learner. So we do have a large number in the lower proficiency levels, but you can see as well from 3 and up, it's well over 60% of our students. So here is that data broken down by school. And I think that each slide will sort of demonstrate the significant needs and challenges that each school faces. At the elementary school, you can see, as we talked about earlier, there are many, many students at those higher levels of proficiency. While that is significant success for the ELL teachers, that is the real challenge of mainstream teachers, is how to incorporate those students into the mainstream content classes. At Cyrus Pierce, you can see again the low-level students make up over 60% in levels 1 through 3. So those students are a serious challenge. The ELL teacher does their best to educate them in terms of their English, but it's on the classroom teachers to deliver content that they can understand. And that's also reflected in the high school data. That is 80% of all ELLs at the high school are in the lower 3 proficiency levels. So that's an enormous challenge for mainstream teachers. How to make their content comprehensible for kids who are still learning English. This data is taken from the Edwin Analytics in the security portal on the Department of Education webpage. You can see that in their English language development, students are making significant progress. That's the good news. The ELL teachers are doing a great job helping them gain proficiency in English. We can always do better, but I think that's something to be proud of at 93% at the high school and 76% overall in the district. In response to Dr. Leprey's question, the total number of former ELLs that are graduates of Nantucket High School is 94. And you can see, according to the demographics, the trend is recent. We have a significant number recently. Obviously, 2015 is projected, and let's hope that they all cross the finish line. So with that in mind, actually, I'd like to open it up to questions for our 2 high school seniors at the end. But in summary, our capacity is taxed because our enrollment is growing so rapidly. So we are doing our best to increase our capacity to accommodate these students and provide them with meaningful opportunities for education. You can see that they did make significant progress in their acquisition of English. We are in compliance with the mandates from the department for equity in teaching ELLs in terms of service delivery hours and the retail initiative that is delivering the SEI endorsement to all the teachers and the administrators. There were 3 new positions created just this year. The 4th teacher at Nantucket Elementary, Nicole Ridge, a TA at the high school, Maryland, and a director. That's my role this year. And we are working to expand the role of Patricia Harding at the elementary school to include family and community outreach. The other bit of great news is that about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had our first meeting of the Parent Advisory Council, where we have representatives from Spanish, Portuguese, Bulgarian, Lithuanian so far, I believe, on the committee. And that has been developed in order to facilitate communication between the school and the immigrant community. And then obviously we need to plan in terms of staffing, space need, and budgeting for this ever-growing population. So I'd like to throw it open to questions now, either for me or for the two students who I've invited and are in attendance.
I'd like to ask the students, what was their experience?
Well, at first it was hard because not speaking the language, it was hard to make friends. I had one friend. I didn't even know English, and I could still communicate with her. And I didn't really get an ELL class so I could learn English. It was just some days in the week that I was supposed to be there, and then it was in middle school that I had Mr. Splain. He was a great teacher, and I think I learned a lot with him. And then in 8th grade was my last year that I took an ELL class. And in 9th grade, I didn't take an ELL class because I didn't really need to.
Thank you, Melanie.
English is wonderful.
I came to Cyrus Pierce Middle School at 8th grade, and I had ELL and ESL, and then I think it was a really good experience for me because I got to meet new friends because I was a little shy and I didn't talk much, so it was where I could talk, and it was great help with my homeworks and stuff, and I could speak English then too, but I learned more, my English, I think expanded. Yeah.
Thank you, girls.
How would you change it?
I really like
I wouldn't change anything about mine because I think that coming here in an early age, I was 10 when I came here, is such a benefit because it's easier to learn the language. So I wouldn't change anything.
Do you feel that the communication with the school and your families allowed them to be involved with your education and the academic aspect of it?
I wanted to ask the same thing, if you felt that we could do something better as far as reaching out to our families. So if you have any advice for us, that would be wonderful. And it's very exciting that you're both, it sounds like you're very involved with the community and very active, and it's very exciting to have you with us, and also so busy in, the community as well. Thank you.
Melissa?
I don't have any questions. I'm incredibly impressed by both your English now and also your academics. And I think it's so wonderful to have just seen you up here and then hearing about your journey through our English language program, which I think has always performed very well. But I think you're right, Jeremiah. We need to be focused on growing it. So my question, I guess, like Dr. Leprey's, was, what would you change? But did you feel along the way that there was something anybody could be doing better, or that you wished you had more of?
Be brave.
Yeah, be honest, because we're just like you, and we want to make sure.
Like I said, I didn't really have an ESL class.
Yeah.
So it was hard to communicate with my peers, but it was then when I moved to middle school that I had Mr. Splain, and I learned more.
Yeah. Okay.
My cousin, he just came here, and I think he's also in the ELL class, but I think his academic class, science and math, is being he has to leave in the middle of the class or something like that to get to ELL. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but he was telling me how it's interfering with his other class because he has to leave in the middle.
I think we heard a little bit about that from Ms. Kubish last time we were here. And my only other question is, do you feel like the school culture, I think you mentioned it, but do you think our school culture is welcoming, and or is it socially, difficult to integrate with the rest of the students and feel like you're a part of it?
Well, most of us just like get together in like our own group, but
Yeah.
I think that everyone else.
That's pretty natural anyway in
is
high school.
Pretty welcoming.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and we also have like groups like clubs like diversity clubs
Mhm.
and like other different clubs where we can like meet and sports. Sports is like I started cheerleading my 9th grade and like I made more friends and I was like more open and I think like if you like join different activities it's much easier for you to like.
That's great.
Yeah, I think
advice.
most of us respect one another.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great to hear.
One of my questions was actually going to be on the opportunity to either have a mentor or be a mentor. And I wondered if you look back onto your early years, would it have been helpful to you to have had a junior or a senior who had been in your position at earlier age to have been like a mentor for you? And then second question is that something that you think that you would be able to do? I'm thinking more during the school day, to do that to younger students. Is that already built in, or is that something that would be helpful?
It would be helpful, and if I could do it, I would do it.
Okay. I have to just say on a personal note, I had the good fortune of going to Squam Swamp with Melanie on her second or third day when she was in Miss Carson's class. And what struck me, not only with you, Melanie, but throughout my experience at the school, is the bravery and the courage that our students face every day and show every day. Because I remember your beautiful smile. I remember that you had zero English, and we did a lot of pointing, and the students did a lot of smiling. And you smiled the entire trip. And I remember having a conversation with my son later that night discussing how difficult it must be for you to come into the school. And I think we see that with all of our students. And school is hard enough, but to come into an environment where you don't have the language, my hat is off to you all, because that's terrific.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Jake, I would ask a question. What does the student council do to reach out, particularly at the high school, where we have students coming in with ELL needs? Do we?
No, we haven't. I'll tell you that we haven't really done any of that. I'll bring it up because I think that's a good point, and we probably should be doing more with that. I have a question. Can I have it? Not for you ladies, but I have a question.
Yeah,
just
yeah.
explain. I don't want to put you on the spot or anything.
Go ahead.
But you're on it, and you're on camera.
What happens if, a 9th grader, let's just say, whose native language is not offered, like the teacher doesn't know the native language and they're level 1? What happens to those kids?
Well, that's a great question, Jake. So all ELL teachers who are certified in ELL have the skills and strategies to teach any foreign, any student, any speaker of another language.
Even Mandarin or something?
Absolutely, because the techniques that ELL teachers are proficient at are designed to instruct a student who speaks any language.
Okay.
So an ELL teacher is not necessarily a bilingual teacher with that student, right? Because I've had, Thai student, you remember James?
Yeah, I remember
right?
James.
Thai student, I didn't speak one word of Thai. I did by the time he left, but that's a great question, and that's something that probably on the minds of a lot of people. How do you instruct a student whose language you have no idea? Obviously, it's helpful to have a few words to gain an inroad and to understand what they're saying, but teachers who have studied ELL theory and practice and who are certified have the skills to teach a student who speaks any language.
Okay, I was just wondering.
It's a great question.
Great answer. Great question.
How do you feel that we're doing as a district communicating with families?
I think we're making great strides. I think the Parent Advisory Council is overdue, but I thought our meeting went really well a couple weeks ago. Our population is growing so rapidly right now that we are taxed to keep up with that. And I think that we're doing great things at Nantucket Public Schools. Obviously, our population has grown enormously, as you just saw, in the last year or two. So we do need to be considering things in the future. But Abby LaRoe, who's not here tonight as part of our Parent Advisory Council, and I are putting together a handbook for parents of ELL students to help them with nurse's office, cafeteria issues, registration for sports, open house, any of those interactive things with the community. We're in the process of making a handbook for families of English language learners. So that's on the top of our list, is to facilitate communication between us and the community.
It's fantastic. Thank you.
And thank you for all of your sharing and for the girls. And if we can assist in that outreach, it comes up at our table quite often. And, you know, we do know we need to do more than we're doing, even though we've grown. So please
Thank you, Robin.
reach out to us.
Do we take questions from the audience or not until later?
It's not a question, it's just a comment and an invitation. I know these are all numbers for you, but for myself and for my colleagues, these are kids that I've known, and I remember, you know, things happening. And the reason we do what we do on a daily basis is for the kids. So if you have a chance to come down at the elementary school and see the kids, it's much better visual than the numbers, even though that presentation was fantastic. So please do, because this is what we do on a daily basis, and it will give you a much clearer picture.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was actually just going to say that I really appreciated you bringing students in, Jeremiah, because it does put some context into what can be just graphs and really beautiful, colorful charts. And I'll second that it was a wonderful, wonderful presentation. I think that we've struggled since my time on the school committee to make sense of our ELL program and its direction and the tension on our capacity. And I'm so great to see, it's great to see you in a leadership position and the work that we're doing. I'm going to throw out the softball of the evening, which is top few things in terms of resources that you see as a priority going forward for this department.
Okay. Priority. ELL students have needs in other areas besides the classroom. So, in my opinion, the whole student is needy just like any other student. So I would say in areas particularly that are not classroom areas, the guidance office, Spanish-speaking guidance counselors, perhaps someone who speaks Spanish in the nurse's office at each school. We now have a Spanish-speaking person in each front office. I'm in that role, even though my Spanish is intermediate. I'm in that role at the middle school. But certainly in those student support areas that we don't have bilingual staff.
And I know that you said this area is developing, and I think I've asked this question of Nancy Miller more times than she'd care to count, but what resources do we have access to for identifying and helping those kids who need special services? And what are some of, I know you said it's a challenge, but how do we address that and look for that in our students?
That's an area that I'm really hopeful that we can explore, because that's going on statewide and nationally right now because of the influx of these kids. It's a challenge to identify a significant need when you don't understand what the kid is saying. So we do have in the high school, who serves the high school and the middle school, I believe she may service some of the elementary population, is Sarah Holton Roth, who does many of our assessments, and she speaks Spanish. So when we actually can identify a kid, and the ELL teachers are the first to see it, a kid who doesn't progress normally, then we can get the parents' permission to start that testing. So we have some mechanisms in place at this time, but we don't have the requisite follow-up. So we identify a kid, and then how do we serve them? Because do they have enough English to benefit from special education services, Or do they need special education services to access the English content? So it's an interesting dynamic that needs to be explored, obviously.
And would you say that that's a small percentage of our ELL population at this point?
I would say it's typical of any other student population. I don't know the exact numbers, honestly, but I would say it's just typical. You know, groups of kids are the same no matter what they look like, you know?
Thank you.
That number's about 16 to 17%, isn't it?
I think it
Is it?
is.
Roughly for special needs across
Right.
the whole population.
So that would make sense that it would be about 16 to 17% of ELLs. So that's an area that I do hope to work on.
Thank you.
Any other
All right.
questions? Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Safety and security update, Diane?
Stand right there. I think that's really
Okay, I'll be quick. I assume everyone has their key card by now.
Yeah.
I don't. Key cards work, you just touch it to the keypad. Like
You wise guy.
Here, click, the door unlocks. Hopefully by November 3rd, we will be going live, and by that I mean the door lock schedule will be in place. I hope to get the doors programmed by then. I'm not sure, this has been a tough project, not without challenges, but there are a lot of benefits to this project. So just to kind of explain how the keys, I guess, work. I sat down with the three principals and they came up with schedules of when teachers' cards would work, when TA's cards would work. We went through, we created groups, and then everybody got assigned however, whatever group they belonged in. So there are certain times of day that their key cards work. There are new intrusion alarms at each school, and the intrusion alarms are not only wired to the doors now we have motion detectors throughout the school, so if somebody happened to get in, if there was a door that wasn't wired properly or something, the alarm would go off because eventually they're gonna hit a motion alarm. There are now 157 cameras throughout the campus. They're quite handy. We look at them more often than I thought we ever would, but we do. And the storage capacity now is about 30 days, whereas before it was about a week, I think, or maybe 10 days. We have panic buttons, or we will have panic buttons in each school when we go live. And the panic buttons not only automatically notify the police department if a panic button is pushed, but they also close the fire doors for added security if there was a threat or something, and maybe the high school pushed it, I don't know. All the fire doors close, so there's more security in that. Like I said, the door locking and unlocking, that's on a schedule, and we also added a new doorway in the pool hallway so that during the day the pool exterior door can be left unlocked, because currently as patrons come in to use the community pool, they have access to the whole school, really. The hallway is left unprotected. When we go live, there will be a new doorway in there. Any questions on that?
It's such a comprehensive undertaking. I mean, I don't have a question about it, but to hear you say that you met challenges, it's not shocking. That's
probably an understatement.
Yeah, it has consumed my life.
Diane, did you say that the teachers have the cards now?
Yes, all teachers, TAs, cafe people, everyone has a card now that works in the system.
And no one has gotten apoplectic about it yet?
No.
It hasn't gone live yet.
I haven't really had any challenges. I did have one card that I actually threw out. I don't know if they put a magnet next to it or something because there's a computer chip in here. So I don't know if they rubbed it up against another card and it killed it. I don't know. We tried everything, but I couldn't get it to come back up. I have changed some people's access. You know, when they have a need, we'll just change their group so that they can come in a little bit earlier, or maybe they need to have it a little bit later, because when we go live, the doors will be locked at 8 o'clock in the morning, and anyone visiting each school will have to push the intercom. There's a little television screen out there that the secretary can see on her phone, and she speaks to the person standing out there and either lets them in or not lets them in, or buzzes them in, and the door unlocks. Eventually, and this is next. And I just put out the bid tonight, before I came here, for we're adding 2 interior sets of doors to the elementary school, because right now their hallways are open when you walk in the door, and that would be a little bit more security. And then we're working on vestibules for each school. So the first school that will get a vestibule is the middle school. It will hopefully be an exterior vestibule. There'll be like a sliding window. You come in with Susie's lunch, you can walk in the door. You can't get into the school unless you have a card. You can hand the secretary lunch or uniform or whatever it is you need to drop off.
Swimming clothes.
Whatever it is.
Homework.
Yeah. Homework, I don't know. So I think the schedule is middle school, high school, elementary school for the vestibules. Any questions on that?
Well, I have a couple of questions before. The alarm, the intrusion alarm, does that work for the kindergarten entrance? So if somebody's leaving the school at 8:05, they're late coming in or
No,
leaving?
this is when we
And
lock
they
up at
hold
night.
the door open? Okay,
Mhm.
okay.
The intrusion
All right.
alarm is only when we lock up at
All
night.
right, so that people will still possibly be able to hold the door open if they're leaving?
You can always exit the school at any time.
Right.
It's coming in that you'd need to be buzzed in if you came in after 8 o'clock and you didn't have a card.
Right.
That's all.
I'm just thinking, because when people leave, sometimes they leave as they're dropping their kids off in the elementary school, they leave out that kindergarten exit entrance. And sometimes I do witness they will hold the door for people coming in.
Oh,
beyond.
that would not sound the alarm.
Okay.
No.
All right.
And if there was an issue, we certainly could address it. There's cameras everywhere,
I was
so.
wondering about that. What's the other question too? I've had great feedback so far,
Good.
because at the elementary school the other day, the doors were locked first thing in the morning, and parents were confused. They were like, I can get in, and I had a good conversation with them about it, and they were very happy about the changes. And I was wondering if we were going to be sending out a letter to our families.
It'll be in our newsletter that will go out end of next week. We'll do a backpack letter, because I just want to make sure everybody knows that as of November 3rd, the doors will be locked, so that we won't have that. That was done by accident, but it was an interesting thing that happened, because we did get good feedback.
Might cut down on tardies too.
Right.
I know your door schedule is
Fine.
much tighter than the rest. And that's fine. Anyone else?
These changes, these implementations would be able to grow should there be facility changes in new schools
Yes.
and/or additions being built. We can just
So
have
the
it.
Genetech system that we purchased
Yeah.
is the same system that they have at the public safety facility.
Okay.
Their cards that the police officers carry to get them into all of their, will be programmed to use in all of our doors. So it's a simple program change. I don't have to issue cards or anything like that. It's just a program change.
Perfect.
And I'm told eventually they'll be able to log into our system without us even knowing. They'll be able to look at cameras, if they want to do a search, if they're doing an investigation, something like that.
Okay.
So I'm told it's a separate
Fire
login.
EMTs too. Do
They
have
don't
access?
really need it. I mean, they have lock boxes outside, and to be honest, once they have to go into the lock box to get into the fire panel, so they need an exterior and an interior key. So giving them a key card, they get in the door, but then they can't get into the fire panel without going into the lock box anyway, so it doesn't really make sense.
Just a question, I don't know if it's much for Diane or for Mike or principals. You threw me off a little bit when you said that people have cards that are timed. Can you just talk about that? Because to me, I'm just thinking everybody would be 7:30 to 4 or 5. But
Now, so, some careful consideration. Teachers have access Monday through Friday from 6:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. But please keep in mind that the school is normally open till 10, or the CPS NHS. The elementary school, the doors are normally unlocked probably until 8. And then they have access from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Saturdays. But again, we have a security guard here on Saturday who opens the pool, so the door is probably going to be unlocked. We need to work on a door schedule when we want it to automatically unlock and lock at night on a Saturday, or if we're, school vacation or something like that. TAs, their times are 6:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday.
Okay.
You might have a teacher who's a coach that would have
Okay.
access on a weekend. Administrators will have complete access, to go in at any time if they want to go in and work on a Sunday or something.
So what about community access, having been at the community school, and I'm just thinking of public response, we're still a community building. That for if I'm coming in for one of the community school programs perhaps, or something else, will there just be hours that they will just be open and...
No, so currently, we've looked at NHS front doors would unlock at 6:30 a.m. and lock at 8 a.m. Monday through Friday, and then unlock at 2:15, but not lock again until 9 p.m.
Oh, okay.
because of all the community school.
Yeah.
And I actually looked at the schedule for the whole next year, and there was really nothing after 8 at night. And if you're in here at 8 at night for a meeting, you're already in here.
Right.
You don't need to have, the door doesn't need to be unlocked. But if we're gonna keep it open until 9. The same with the pool doors, because
Yeah.
people come in for basketball games and things like that, or they might park in that parking lot to come in for a meeting. That will be the same schedule as the front door of the high school.
Okay.
Things like that. The middle school,
Yeah.
I think we decided to close at 8 because we try to lock that wing down at 8 for energy efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean,
Okay.
this is really a living document. It's going to change as we find things aren't working or are working or...
Yeah.
Diane,
Yes,
so you're going to have a record then of every time the door is activated?
yes.
So then you really don't need to take attendance?
Well, you do because the kids don't have cards. It's interesting. They were showing me how to run reports, and we ran a report one day, denied access at the front door. And there were some kids outside trying different codes, trying to get in. There aren't any codes. We didn't want to give it codes. We could give it codes, but then codes get out, and then that kind of cuts our security off. So we didn't give it any codes. But it was kind of funny because it tells you denied access. And then there was another one, there was a teacher who was trying to get in on a Saturday at 6 o'clock in the morning. Well, she got denied access because she doesn't really have access till 8
Love those
a.m.
teachers.
unless she gets in by the security guard. So there are different situations.
So then thinking that there probably will be some kind of system put in place if I'm a teacher, I lose my card, that they're required to report it immediately, because then you would need to change that, and yeah, okay.
I've met with all 3 schools. Actually, today I went to the elementary school and the CPS and stressed, if you lose your card, you need to tell me immediately.
Right.
Me or Joanne Johnson, because we both have access to go in and kill the card and then create a new one. Yes.
So there's in the system, not only a record of when the key card is used, but then you can pull up the corresponding video of who's trying to use that card. So if the card gets stolen, we can see who it is that's then using that if we haven't yet deactivated that card. I told the story to the CPS faculty today. I don't think the people involved will mind. I won't mention names, but you'll know who I'm talking about.
I already know. It's the same thing.
When Torrance was being trained on the system, they wanted to show him that capability. And so they said, so let's just call up a random use of the card and then we'll pull up the corresponding video. And the name of the card being used was a male name. And they pulled up the video and it was a female using the card. Now it happens to be a husband and wife who work at the school.
I don't know who that is.
A perfect example of that we can, we'll be able to see who it is
Yeah.
that's entering the building.
Yeah. That's terrific. Well, kudos to you, because I know that this was no small task, and this is something that the school district has been discussing for a long time, so.
And it's ongoing, so hopeful to go live November 3rd. I think we're going to try to go, what we're going to call soft live. We're going to get the doors programmed, and then we're going to dog them down ourselves so that we're still opening during the day for now. And then hopefully November 3rd, we're just going to leave it alone and see what happens, so.
Great, well, good luck.
Thank you for all your work.
Comments from the public? Seeing none? Committee discussion, votes to be taken, the trip to Spain. We have someone that's going to speak in favor?
The annual trip to Spain.
Okay.
Short and sweet.
Can we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Looks great.
Student activities accounts.
Okay. I'm sure that you remember some time ago when we had an audit and we had a report to the school committee, the results of that audit. We have been working in the last year to make sure that we are following the accounting practices recommended by our auditors. And I've tried to present this in a format that is, I hope, understandable. You'll see at the elementary school that there's certainly not as much action. There are probably a dozen accounts there, and you can see the balance as of 6/30/14, and then we've made adjustments to that balance. And part of this vote today, I hope, will be the recommended transfer from the agency account of the elementary school to the agency account at the high school. But they will be in good shape moving forward with the accounts that they need to have move forward. Understanding that there are two sources of money for your sub-accounts. One is the money that's in your checking account, and the other is the money that's in the agency account. You can see that as your savings account, if you will. And the two of those should add up to the amount in total with all of the sub-accounts. The middle school, and the second page are the number of former accounts at the elementary school that we would recommend to deactivate, because we're not using those accounts anymore. I know. And then the middle school, we have about a dozen accounts, a total of about $28,000 once we clean this up. And we wanted to make sure that you could see the mission, the activities, the revenue sources for each of these. The middle school was probably the closest to what it should have been through the audit process. And then we had the high school accounts, and we've shown you a number of accounts that we will deactivate. And I think as you go through this list, it's pretty easy to tell that, oh my goodness, there were 4 Spanish accounts when we only needed 1 Spanish account. Or there were, 3 or 4 music accounts when we really just needed 1. Over a period of time, 20, 30 plus years, accounts got added and were no longer used. So I believe that at the end of this, we will have all of this cleaned up. I did meet with the auditor and the town finance director, Brian Turbot, and the auditors. They both were ecstatic and gave their stamp of approval, bringing this forward to you. I can certainly answer a lot of questions. I think it's understandable that there's a lot more money in the high school activity accounts because there's a lot more fundraising at the high school. So I'm happy to bring this to you for your vote tonight, and then we will be able to give the accounts back to the principals and say, now we have a good starting point and we can track this annually.
Questions?
I have a question. NES has an account for the 5th grade, year 2021, and CPS has an account for that class as well.
That should have moved forward. I'm not sure if we have the dates wrong there. But 2021 would be the 6th grade, the present 6th grade. So I think those in the elementary school should say 22 moving forward. So thank you very much. noticing that.
And one other quick question. Can you remind me how long we're going to keep the money for the graduate classes?
Once this is cleaned up, our next move at a subsequent school committee meeting would be to bring some of the older class accounts to you, and by policy that is now adopted, recommend that transfer to the Nantucket Education Trust, which is, would restrict those funds to be used for students. So that's the good news. We would anticipate that probably we would keep 5 to 10 years of class accounts, but moving forward, we have made it clear to all of the graduating classes that it's use it or lose it at the end of the year, so that we won't have that problem going forward. I mean, it's pretty easy to see that there's some very high amounts that are just sitting there, and the auditors just, said that just cannot be. We need to move that. So we will notify the class officers and then make a recommendation to you to vote that into the trust.
Thank you.
Robin?
No.
Mike, going forward, how often will these accounts be audited?
Going forward, they will have some kind of audit annually. It may not be by the Tony Roselli and those auditors. That will happen at least every 3 years.
I see.
That it will be by an accredited auditing firm. But it can be audited in the time in between, either by Brian Turbot or the town finance, or even by Glenn Field.
Great.
Pauline?
No, thank you very much for the work you've done here.
Jake, since they want to get their hands on your money, do you have any thoughts?
I think my president might have a thought. Do you have anything?
I'm the senior class president. I was under the impression that our money is held for reunions in the future. No?
It has been, but that is not good practice. And so that's why, moving it forward, the class can determine if they wish to create an outside account outside of the activity accounts. That can be dicey, quite frankly, because you're putting money into the hands of two co-signers, and the auditors don't really recommend that, although it's allowed. Okay? You're welcome.
So do we
Okay.
need to vote?
We do.
Okay, can I have a motion to support the recommendations of the superintendent regarding the student activity accounts?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Unanimous, thank you.
Budget directives.
Those are the draft that you had with you last time, and I'm not sure if you have anything that needs to change.
Robin?
So they basically seemed like what was presented.
Pauline? Jake?
I'm fine.
Okay. So if we have a motion to approve the budget directives as we reviewed last meeting and brought up for a vote
So
this time.
moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
A gift donation of $2,500 from ASAP to Nantucket Community School for YELL, Youth Empowering Lasting Leadership Program. On behalf of the School Committee of Nantucket Public Schools and Nantucket students who will benefit, we thank you most sincerely and acknowledge receipt of your generous $2,500 donation to the YELL program. So thank you very much, ASAP.
Very nice. Thank you.
Is there anybody from ASAP here?
No, I think Holly McGowan is now the president of ASAP. So
Do we
if
have a
you
motion to
if you
accept?
see her,
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Transfers and invoices?
Motion to approve?
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
And minutes of October 7th. Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Jen, you always find something?
No, I'm good.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Superintendent's report.
Just a couple of quick things. The building project, I try to give that to you in the Friday update so that you know what's going on. I think we've had some really good movement. The site review committee has narrowed down the sites to 2, and we hope that we will be able to, or be ready to go public with those sites soon. We have many groups working, thanks to the, administration who is facilitating much of the marketing and outreach. We have a group working with Lance Kelly with the website development, and we've contracted with Lance to help build that website for the building project. Gino Gang was taping, doing some video work, and working on that with me and with Kim and I think Mr. Horton and others at the elementary school the other day. So that's moving forward. I think Nina Slade is organizing letters to the editor. So we're in pretty good shape with that. I know John Bucky has developed a list of places that and groups that we will bring our show to, and so that is developing. Really, just there's a lot going on behind the scene. Mike Horton has a group developing frequently asked questions and the answers to those questions. And I think we'll start to see something maybe even in the newspaper weekly with that. So there's a lot going on, and I think the big question is the cost. And we have had this week the first look at a cost for the project, which is higher. I think I can speak for Diane. Higher than we expected, particularly for the middle school addition piece, which is, not even a fifth of the project that the new intermediate school will be. And we have gone out to another architect to vet those numbers to make sure that they are, accurate before we go public with a figure. I think our concerns are mostly in the high site development piece, not so much the construction costs. But we're working on that, and I really feel that things are starting to move forward on that front.
Excellent.
Questions?
Mike, so if there were a group of residents who would like to have somebody come and discuss, it would go through John?
That would be great. Let
Because I
John
have
know.
had a couple of groups that have asked.
Wonderful.
So that's good to know.
Yep.
And then where are we as far as the request at town meeting? Are we looking to recommend a separate town meeting for part of it, or how is that going to?
I don't believe so, and we've had some communication with Libby. I think it will go. There's a lot of question as to what else might be going in April. And we still don't have some answers to that. Will the fire station move forward with a building? South Water, will that be moving forward? Will the hospital be moving forward or not? So I think that there still are a lot of moving parts, and I think some of those moving parts will maybe dictate our steps. But I think we all know, and I hope agree, that we need to move forward in April. We're not looking to postpone. We need to move forward, and that is our intention.
Great.
Okay.
The homeschooling report was prepared by Logan and Abby with a little bit of editing by me. You'll see that there aren't a lot of students this year for 14-15, although Abby did share with me that there are 2 or 3 other possibilities coming up, one being in the middle and one being at the high school that we know about. Understand that typically when students get to 11th and 12th grade, they've reached an age where they do not have to file for homeschooling anymore. So that's why you see that drop off. It also drops off, as you go up in grades, because it's more challenging to homeschool your child as they're getting into the subjects, required. And I think many parents are not as comfortable doing that when they're into chemistry and biology.
I was going to ask about that. Do you have a chemistry lab at
algebra.
home?
Right. It's not unheard of, but it tends to be unusual. So those are our numbers at this time, and they'll probably change this year. That heading should be 2015. Sorry.
Any questions on that?
No, thank you.
And then finally, on the horizon, we're in pretty good shape. I wasn't sure whether you wanted Glenn Kuchar at your regular meeting or whether you wanted to meet with Glenn before the meeting on November 4th. And Logan, I think that's what we were hoping to have clarity on from the school committee.
I thought we were meeting before, but I will, open to either.
I thought we were meeting before as well.
Okay.
5
p.m.?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
That
I think
would,
if Glenn has any burning desire or issues he thinks would be well-suited to present to the public, that I wouldn't be adverse to giving him time if he's got it. But
he was interested in your, feedback, and I think a couple of you gave him some ideas, but I think it would make it easier for him to be prepared to answer the questions that you might have if they're specific.
Yep.
So,
on the
I just wanted to get
sorry.
Jake.
well, I just had a question
Okay.
on the horizon. Could we do and I don't know if this is too soon, but perhaps the PAC, maybe an invitation to come and meet the committee in the springtime and just let us know how their year has been and what some of the results have been of their meeting. I know it's been great when we have the Special Needs Advisory Council come and check in with us, and I think it would be nice to
that's a great idea.
have them come.
I'll put that on the annual.
Great, thank you.
Jake, anything from the students?
Yes. As a student council, we met today during homeroom, talked about the generic movie nights, dodgeball, and maybe setting up a few dances. But thanks to Mr. Bucky, we now have Dr. Bucky. My fault. We now have assemblies. We're in charge of the assemblies, and we made this pretty good idea today to use that as kind of a medium to to talk about the social media thing, and also bring up issues that the student body might have that they maybe want to address. So hopefully we need it's in the preliminary stages, but hopefully in the future we can have an assembly for that.
Okay.
That's
Great.
all.
Great, thank you.
Anything else?
I have one. I would like to give a shout out, and I'm going to look at the camera, because I've learned we have a number one fan, Bobby Planza, who watches the school committee meeting every time. So can you wave at the camera and say, "Hi, Bobby Planza, thank you for watching."
Hi, Bobby. Do your homework.
Yeah.
He's the 5th grader. Do your homework.
Anything else?
That's it for me. Thank you.
Can we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.